So the good news is if or when you decide to automate this process and move into BI, which is usually the way to go, the good news is we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We have to see the wheel that is kind of clunky, that is working in Excel, and replicate those rules into the BI solution.
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our number one priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be joining from. So this is our webinar series, and today we have a very exciting topic. And I know everybody is talking about AI these days, but BI is as foundational, far more pragmatic than any other technologies that we know. So we are going to touch a little bit on that. Hopefully we can cover, some of the trends and some real case studies, live case studies. We are going to discuss on those as well, some of the concepts. So we'll get into all of that. Before that, we are going to start with everybody's intros. So I'm going to start with my quick intro. Sam Gupta, principal at Elevate IQ. Elevate IQ is the independent vendor agnostic technology advisory firm. We help our clients with technology strategy, system selection, as well as change management. On that note, Dennis, welcome. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Sam. We've been trying to get this together for years. Glad we finally got together. So I am Dennis Easter, Senior Solutions Architect at Algorithm. We are Acumatica partners, and we also have a new business unit called Algorithm Intelligence, and focusing on decision support. And DataSelf BI plays a good part of our portfolio.
Yeah, we all need to make some good decisions. So thank you so much for doing that, Dennis. Johnny, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for the intro, Sam. Johnny Girardi. I'm DataSelf's founder and CEO. I call myself a big data geek. I was a software engineer in my early career, became a business person. And for the past 20 plus years, I've been helping organizations make more informed decisions, better informed decisions, enhancing their decision support system. I'm excited to talk about experience with algorithm in manufacturing today and working with you, Sam, as well.
So amazing. Thank you so much for being here. And in the age of AI, I guess we all need to be probably giant data geeks. So hopefully you can teach us how to be that. So once again, thank you so much for being here. And if you're in the audience, we always love to learn a little bit about you as well. If you feel like introducing yourself, maybe introduce, provide your location. If you feel comfortable sharing your LinkedIn profile. Some people like to network in the audience. Again, it's totally up to you what you are willing to do. But if you have any sort of questions, comments, obviously you are here to learn, but we learn from you as much as you do from us. So if you have any sort of stories that you might be able to share, we would love to touch on those as well if you have seen similar stories. So again, it's a very shared environment. So let's do this together. On that note, in terms of the webinars, so we have a lot of different series that we do. And if you want to know about them, the best place for that would be events and webinar page on elevateiq.com. You can also subscribe to our newsletter. That's where we send out a lot of different notifications. So on that note, let's get started. So Dennis, do you want to start? I know that you have a little deck that you would like to share. So let's get that rolling.
Okay, sure. Is it up now, Sam?
It's up. It's up. Yep.
Okay.
It's beautiful.
So appreciate that, Sam. So today we're going to talk about and have a case study and some details, particularly about BI forecasting, manufacturing, and how we can use it in material planning. So let's take a look at what we're actually going to talk about today. So we're going to talk about why use a forecast, and we're going to touch on a couple forecast types. And then, there are some things that, some landmines, some pitfalls that people come across when they're developing forecasts. We'll talk about those. And then Johnny's got some insight about how forecasts can really improve your manufacturing operations, in your material planning. And then there's always the question of what is a single source of truth when you start talking about a BI platform, because you're pulling in information from a CRM, an ERP, maybe some Excel files. So how do we define a single source of truth? And then, Johnny's actually going to get into a demonstration to show how BI can be used to create a stronger material and production plan. So with that, let's go ahead and take a topic. The first slide is really, as we look at different forecasts, each one requires a different form of data, a different source of data. So as we look at revenue forecasting, from the inventory side, really we need to look at, what's that sales volume, maybe down to a SKU level or maybe a family level, in order to create that revenue forecast. But then as you get into cash flow planning, it not only needs that sales information, then you've got to also put in your AR terms. And then, because cash flow doesn't just flow one way, we've also got to consider the purchasing information, payment terms, lead times, those type of things, in order to make sure that the timing is right. Because if your cash flow timing isn't correct, then your forecast isn't worth the spreadsheet that it's written in. But when we get into the more complex material planning that we're going to be talking about today, there are a lot of information that comes from different sources. So you not only have your material requirements, for the bill of materials, what's going into each of those finished goods that you're going to be selling, but you also have to look at the production routing. And that's the production time to push it through the shop. And what are the lead times, not just for the acquiring and procuring the product, but also what's a production lead time? And so that's going to come from your production routing, maybe some outside processing that you use as well. And so, Johnny, what are some of the other data points that people use, or some considerations that they need to consider in this?
Yeah, that was good stuff, Dennis. For the past year or so, with the whole tariffs, no tariffs, there's a whole different set of new dynamics that many manufacturing companies are struggling with. Sometimes costs change overnight from up and down, so that can cause a lot of replanning the production based on cost, and even affecting sales. Sometimes people actually have to source different vendors because the ones that they've been currently using for a while become completely impossible for them to sell products for what they already have sold. So lately, for the past year or so, there's a whole layer of complexity around manufacturing and the inventory planning around it. And again, as you mentioned, being able to quickly get all the data points from your manufacturing process, from the sales, the cost, the cash flow projection sort of thing that you mentioned. Quite often in manufacturing, they have good lines of credit to help, deal with cash flow issues. However, again, for the past year or so, interest rates went up, and that affects the cost dramatically. So lately has been fun, if you want to use a light term to tell all the additional challenges. And if companies don't have the data points that they can trust, and have a system that can digest all of these changes quickly and automatically, it's a nightmare. We've been getting a lot more business lately because people are perceiving, having the data and having tools, BI with AI, automating a lot of these manual processes that people have been doing in the past using Excel and spending days or weeks sometimes to do the inventory manufacturing planning. Solving that problem can help them more quickly understand the changes that are coming from the world, tariffs or different supplies, how that will affect their whole production planning, and quickly decide, should we continue, should we renegotiate, should we change? So it's being even more critical now than ever, having a system that can help reduce the time to get all the data points into a format where decision makers can quickly see the effect of these changes and change the planning as needed and push it forward.
Yeah, Johnny, you hit on a really good point there with all, being able to update because of the rapid changes. And you mentioned the struggles with Excel, and that's one of the things that we're finding out more and more in our decision support business is Excel has its limits, and you don't build out a complex planning system in Excel and know where that limit is. It's when now you start to see the inefficiencies of it and you realize, okay, I've outgrown Excel, now what do I do? Okay. And managing that data is a big part of that. So let's take a look at some of the common problems. What are problems with forecasting? That make the forecasts less accurate, less effective as they can be. And that top line is written in the way that I try to express the importance of it is you've got to have good data in order for a forecast, for it to be used in an effective forecast. And as Johnny said, being able to bring accurate data from different sources together in a format that can be used is a huge problem. And so I'm sure that Johnny's going to have more to say about that. And also the second point is, who owns the forecast? Because so often the forecasts that I'm working with, they've been assigned back to the finance department. But most of the forecasts really affect other departments. Having finance build out a sales forecast only causes problems for the sales department. Finance doesn't own that. And so really establishing the ownership of the forecast is a key in order to making it an effective forecast that is accepted by the stakeholders. Johnny, what are you running into in those cases?
Yeah, it's a good point, Dennis. To me, in forecasting, there is the people problem. We need people involved in the different areas of expertise that quite often are required in the forecasting whole process. And people are people, so that kind of process, it's you got to work with the people that you have. But then comes the data manipulation problem, which quite often only one group of people has the technical capability to do it, which is usually finance or IT. And that's where a lot of the problems start to derive in forecasting, because quite often, as you mentioned, the finance/IT, they are not the people doing the forecasting. They're people that own the data system. So they know technical things, they know databases or whatever, but they don't understand the business problem per se. And while the people that know the business problem, they have to, it's a collaboration where the data problem, because it's not automated, it adds a whole group of people into the process that many times causes more friction, not because they they cannot do the job, is because they're not experts in that particular business process. So part of the challenges that I see when the IT/finance owns a chunk of the data preparation problem, and they do this manually in Excel, in Google Sheets and whatnot, is just, you put another group of people to help with the others, and naturally this becomes slower, more friction, more mistakes, and I didn't understand you, oops, or I thought you said something else, and that makes the process even slower. And that's pretty much, this webinar is around how can technology, BI with AI, automate the mechanical parts of the data preparation, so the weight or the need of the IT/finance becomes only for the thing that they're really required, right? They have usually a say in the process, yes, they do, but the mechanical work that quite often is again in outside in Excel in Google Sheets, if that work can be automated, quite often the whole manufacturing planning becomes significantly more efficient.
Yeah, you're exactly right, and that really hits on the next point. And that is that a good forecast includes data from multiple places, and so I think that your experience in that ETL, the data preparation type of activity, I think can really lead to some great discussions. And I think I'm looking forward to seeing what you have to say about that, because what if you can, as you said, if you can simplify that process, you can really take out a lot of the friction in the forecasting process and make it easier then to integrate that forecast into your actual material requirements planning system inside the ERP. And so removing the friction to create the great forecast then enables the next step in material planning. And as we look at using BI in the forecast, the forecasting, as Johnny said, it eliminates the Excel nightmare. And this is something that companies are dealing with more and more. We're seeing it more and more in our decision support practices. They've outgrown Excel because Excel doesn't scale to the extent that a dedicated decision support BI system does. And there are a lot of reasons for that, and most of them have to do with control. I think BI provides a level of control that you don't get with Excel. So you get away from the Excel nightmare. We have a customer at Algorithm that we are migrating onto Acumatica, and they are their business is run by what they call the Mother of God spreadsheet. and that when you look at that spreadsheet, it's called the Mother of God spreadsheet for two reasons. One is because everything from the Mother of God is in that spreadsheet. And also, when you look at it, your first reaction is Mother of God. It's extreme. It is an extreme example of we used the tools we had, but now they don't work anymore. And so as Johnny's going to take us through a look at using BI to support forecasting for your material planning, combining that multiple sources of data. Again, doing that inside of Excel becomes very tedious, But one of the things that BI does, and DataSelf has done a great job of, is really creating the visualizations. Because looking at columns and pages and rows of data, not a great way to do analysis. And so getting a visualization to find where those outliers are, and then analyzing where you see those changes that need to be addressed, and getting down into a smaller group of rows and columns is a great way to do it. And so before I turn you loose on the demonstration, Johnny, go ahead and give us a commercial, you will, for using BI to support your forecasting.
Yep, good stuff, Dennis. So first of all, I tell companies that Excel is great until it isn't. The same thing for Google Sheets, and whatever I tell Excel applies to Google Sheets as well, but I'll keep Excel to make it simpler. Quite often when a company is doing their material planning and they start to have challenges doing in their current system, whatever the current system is, Excel is usually the way to export the data into Excel. And quite often they have to pull data from multiple systems, sometimes the CRM, the ERP, the MRP, supply shipment system. Sometimes, you have to see what's happening with, the shipments coming from Asia, whatever. So it's a lot of, exporting to Excel. And I usually tell people, if you're doing things in Excel and you're struggling, being slow, being time consuming, many times the numbers don't match, people dispute them. One of the good news is, well, it looks like, your company is operating, if it was not operating, you'd not be in business. So it's operating on Excel and is struggling. A lot of the business rules that can be automated today are known, are coded in Excel and with the people that are a part of the process. So the good news is, if or when you decide to automate this process and move into BI, which is usually the way to go, the good news is we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We have to see the wheel that is kind of clunky, that is working in Excel, and replicate those rules into the BI solution. And one of the good news now is that BI has AI. Just going back to Sam's, your point about the AI. Yeah, we've been working with what we call BI with AI for 8 years. So AI in BI is not something new for the past couple of years. No, it's been around for a while. Of course, the new AI generation has put things on a whole different level as far as, a lot more use cases where AI is awesome. But regardless, the bulk of the problem of bringing an Excel-based material planning into BI, that's a BI problem where the AI just accelerates the conversion of the rules that are in people's minds in Excel into a process that, I tell people that when you're doing inventory planning, there's a portion of the labor associated with this process, which hopefully we don't automate. Hopefully humans will continue to be relevant in this process. We know the business, we know the government, we know what's happening, and people hopefully will continue to be critical for that portion of the problem. However, there's a big chunk of it, and sometimes it's like, 80% of the labor associated to close an inventory planning can be completely automated by a BI solution. And that's really the appealing side of things, is removing things that are repetitive, that humans can make mistakes, that human can dispute. Hey, you show me this number, but I think it's wrong. And now you have to go through the details to show who's right. And if you are, using Excel, it's hard to tell, shut up, the numbers are being vetted, already as a process. If you don't believe, tell me why the current, single version of truth is no longer applying. And many times removing those friction points, removing the points of failure, again, dramatically shrinks the part of the process where, if you're using Excel, is what we call the Excel hell, the nightmare, and it makes the process a lot more efficient. So that's high level, the perspective that we talk about, how the BI supports forecasting in material planning as a whole.
Yeah. Thanks, Johnny. And I think that you hit on a real key for the integration of AI into BI, and that is That is to automate those repetitive processes. And the part that AI struggles with is the judgment, as you said, because it doesn't know current conditions. It doesn't know things that humans know. And I think that's one of the risks that I see as AI develops, that people are considering removing junior staff because AI can provide the same work. Well, in 10 years now, we have no junior staff, and we have senior staff that don't know anything because they've never been left to have judgment. So appreciate that, Johnny. And now, without further ado, the one slide that introduces Johnny in the demonstration on how DataSelf is going to address some very specific needs that we've talked about today. So I'm going to stop sharing. Johnny, I'm going to hand this over to you. All right. And let you show us an example of BI supporting material planning.
Okay, thanks, Dennis. I'll share my screen in a minute. Just give a little bit of the context of this presentation. So it's about a manufacturing client of ours where they have a CRM system where they manage opportunities. So part of the sales forecast was looking at open opportunities that are being negotiated. In part of the forecast on the sales side was also looking at the past to see what we have sold in the same period in the prior, in their case was the same period last year, in combining, what's in the pipeline, what was sold last year, coming up with a projection of sales, of demand of their products. And then once you have this projection, then you go to the cash flow, do we have money to support it? And again, usually the problem is they have the money from banks, but the problem is cost. Cost is high. So sometimes the cash flow projection would be a discussion around how to deal with a managing the resources in a way that we don't keep the banks as our main, cost in our P&L. And then eventually you go to the inventory planning folks that they see what's on hand as finished goods, as raw materials, where the raw materials coming from overseas are, and eventually they come up with the bumps to support this process, the work order, and then what else we need to do as far as producing or purchasing in order to fulfill their orders. This process was done weekly. Pretty much, there was a business analyst on the IT/accounting. There was the person responsible for the data problem. She would be working with, the sales people, the finance people, the inventory planning people, the production people. So part of the process was she talking with a bunch of people in crunching the numbers so they could have by Friday closing the planning for the coming week. Now she was saying that primarily Wednesday was the day when she would take all the data from the systems, the CRM, the ERP, the shipment system. So she would export a bunch of things to Excel. And when she was saying when it was a good Wednesday, which was not very common, but on a good Wednesday, she would finish the prep work in the morning, pretty much in 4 hours. She would export everything, she put in Excel, she run the macros. In a good Wednesday, she would finish this work, in the morning. She said that, most Wednesdays were not good because many times, exporting the data would not export. She would have to export again. Sometimes she would run the macros, and sometimes the data volume would go very high and Excel would crash. She would have to run the Excel and not touch the computer for hours. And in the last 5 minutes, Excel crashed. So she would have to go again and see what happened and run it again. So she was telling that most Wednesdays they were not good Wednesdays because of the Excel nightmare. The other problem that she was telling was once she finished the Excel prep, and she would send the reports to each individual, group of teams for them to look at the data and then to start to making their human interaction. One of the things that was really sucky in a way was people disputing the numbers. because this process in Excel was clunky. Many times she had to tweak things so the Excel would work. Sometimes errors would come in the process, so the trust in the reports was very low. And many times the dispute was just a trust issue. So she would have to go back and prove, no, my numbers are right. And sometimes they were not right. So the trust in the system was very low because of the Excel human interaction. And pretty much she was telling that from Wednesday through Friday, um, pretty much a good chunk of her job was being sure for 3 days she had enough bandwidth to tackle the inventory planning. She had many other jobs to do besides inventory planning, but in 3 days, sometimes she had zero time for everything else because of this dispute, and going back and running the Excel again, the Excel crashed again, and it was taking 3 days on average to complete the process.
Hey, Johnny, can you provide some more context in terms of the business, which business we are talking about? Because not every business is going to use CRM. We might have some people in the audience and the listener base. They might not use a CRM. Sometimes, it might not be the same product. Sometimes their planning may be different. So maybe provide some context into the business type and the product type they are selling so that these guys can contextualize a little bit more. And then we can talk about differences in planning for those businesses as well. But if you can provide some more context into the business and the product they are trying to sell, I think that will be far more relatable.
Yep. So they have a made-to-order manufacturing finished goods. Was products, was not chemicals. And in this particular use case that I kind of selected to talk about today, I use it because we know a lot about them. They use multiple systems. We do have many clients that they don't have CRM. They don't have shipping systems. Pretty much all the data that they need comes from the ERP or MRP. However, the challenge that Excel creates, Excel pretty much is the place where people export the data from whatever the data is into Excel. And then quite often this challenge of spending hours, sometimes days around Excel, crashing and disputing this problem. If you have these problems, no matter if you have only one source of data or multiple, if Excel became a nightmare, that's when you should look at a BI solution to automate the process. So it's not so much about what system you're using, but are you having Excel hell issues? Make sense?
Yeah, great points. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and Johnny, I think that you've raised a couple key points there, and the first being that all of that manual interaction with the data erodes trust. And if there's not the trust, then that decision process just becomes longer. There's more friction in it, and so we're not being effective whenever we don't have trust. So I think that's a great point you made.
Yep. Yeah, if people don't trust the system, every time that they think, the system, the data is not true, they just dispute it, and then it becomes a struggle, right? We need to see who has the right data. And to me, this is one of the challenges when people don't use BI as part of the decision support system. If every report that you build in your ERP, in your CRM, in your MRP, whatever, every report that you build, it uses logic inside of that report. And if you have a report that should be showing a similar information where you build the logic inside of the other report, sometimes the numbers don't match because the truth is built on the report, not on the back end. And that's one of the reasons why companies adopt BI as part of the decision support system, where the truth is defined on a server, where people that know data modeling are responsible to be sure this truth is maintained. And if rules change, they have to validate and change the rules. And once you define the rules, how you do your sales, your gross profit, your inventory planning, you define it on the server. So when you're running the reports are just rendering the truth in different slices. It's not creating a new truth. It's just slicing and dicing it. Therefore, Pretty much once the data has been validated, there is no, is this right or wrong? No, this is right. So it removes the friction of people disputing the numbers.
Yep.
And it's a human process, right? You trust and then you move forward. And if you don't, and we tell people, when you have a properly maintained decision support system, you have to have a process that in a certain frequency, at least once a year or whatever, people need to validate that the reality hasn't changed in a way that the truth built on the server is outdated. So you need to have a quality assurance process that guarantees on the server that the truth is current, because if you do that, you guarantee that all reports will always have the right numbers and you don't have a friction as far as not trusting the numbers.
Great point. So do you want to start with the demonstration? Yeah.
I know the time is running, right?
We still have a lot of time. We have 25 minutes. We can have some jokes towards the end if we have time.
Can you guys see my web browser?
Yes.
So now I'm gonna go a little fast because I'm a data geek, and if you let me, I go into the data geek corners. So I want to be sure that I cover high level information, some architecture right now, and sometimes I might geek out a little bit, but I'm not going to spend too much time in too technical things. But for those of you who are more technical, you might appreciate the data points that I bring. So first of all, from an architecture standpoint, this is we call BI with AI. Primarily, it's looks on the far left your data sources, your ERP system, your MRP, CRM. It doesn't matter. All the data that you have in your systems, the idea is to bring that data into a data warehouse. That's where you do the modeling. Modeling means the single version of the truth. That's where you define the rules for your reports, and it's AI powered, meaning bringing the data from your systems into the data warehouse is pretty much what we call a no-code problem. It's easy to bring the data. You can refresh in a certain frequency. This whole process, you don't need to be a programmer. You don't need to know data warehousing. AI can help you. But if you do have, programming skills and you know how to customize, some data problems sometimes can benefit from a low-code, full-code capability. Anyhow, this is where the heavy lifting is done. Things that people do in Excel, using macros, manually exporting, crashing, doing it again. This section here, data warehousing, usually automates the hell out of the process. And that's where you can, again, create the single version of the truth, test it, guaranteed is reliable. From that point on, people are not going to be disputing, and the reports will run automatically on schedule and in anytime, anywhere. The second step is where you see the reports and dashboards. In absolutely Excel, many times continues to play a pivotal role to see certain reports in dashboards. Might be Excel, might be the best tool. What we have found is that many people, many users, they find Excel slow, clunky, and you have to have a desktop. So we support a lot of other amazing data visualization platforms. Power BI and Tableau and Fabric are the most popular ones, even though some companies also use others. Anyhow, the main point here is what tool or tools will show the data to the right people in a way that they consume the information and make more informed decisions. So we don't put any locks in what tools you want to use. We bring options. At the end of the day, once you have the data modeled, automatically extracted, and you put your reports and dashboards in the proper visualization tool. You put security to guarantee that only the right people will have access to the right information. Primarily, what you're doing is you're automating a lot of the plumbing, the data pipelines. You guarantee that the single version of truth has been properly, maintained in the back end, and users will be able to see the planning, slice and dice the planning, pretty much anytime, anywhere. And the main thing that this does not automate is the human intelligence collaborating with the process. Any comments or questions from you guys before I move on?
I have one question here. So in your case, let's say, I think you say that you have a DataSelf ETL. Generally, when you look at other BI platforms in the market, they are probably going to combine and they are going to tightly couple themselves with a specific platform. In your case, you are saying, we are flexible. But overall, I guess from the implementation perspective, let's say if somebody wants to go down this road, how much effort is required from their perspective? Let's say if they want to enable, maybe they have some sort of ERP, maybe they have Excel. So what would be effort from their side to enable something like this?
Well, there are good news and bad news. So the good news is if you go to our website and see the kind of packages that we have 15, 16 different systems like ERP and CRM systems that we already have the bulk of the mappings and modeling done out of the box. So if your organization has Acumatica, NetSuite, Sage, Microsoft Dynamics, there's a bunch of systems that we already support. If you have one of these systems, pretty much deploying the out of the box is done within a week. It's fairly straightforward. The actual effort is hours that you just connect the dots, put security, and the system will refresh, will take the data from your source systems, populate your data warehouse, and populate your reports in, let's say, Power BI or Tableau. So this process is very straightforward. So the good news is deploying the DataSelf system is usually, you don't need to be a programmer, you don't need to know technical, you don't need to know BI at all, you just need to know security and configuration. So that's the good news. It's very, very fast to deploy the system out of the box. What I call the bad news, which usually not bad, is we tell people that on average, 80% of the BI platform of a company is done in about a week. If you're to start from scratch, it usually takes years to start and to get to 80%. With DataSelf, it takes in about a week. Then the rest of the 20%, which is customizing the solution, looking exactly how you do your manufacturing, how you do your sales, those things take extra effort for the last 20%. And that sometimes for some companies is hours, days, or weeks worth of work. So on average, we tell people that the DataSelf will be in production for part of your solution. If you have one of our pre-map systems within the first month, pretty much you're going to have part of the DataSelf solution up and running with the data, the single version of truth validated for some modules.
That's commendable. Thank you so much for those insights, Johnny.
Yep. All right, so let me move on. I'm going to show one more technical, the most technical slide is the next one. When I talked about the data modeling, the reason why data modeling in the data warehouse can automate and can simplify the process is because if you think forecasting and all of this manipulation in Excel, this is usually not a simple problem. It is complicated, and quite often you have a lot of data, and that's why it's clunky. That's why many times Excel chokes. It's not as if you're having these issues, is because you don't have a simple data problem. You need the horsepower, you need the technology to automate it. And part of the solution is what we call the galaxy schema. So don't freak out with this slide. This is called a galaxy schema. What is a galaxy schema? So let me take 2 minutes just to give a little bit of, Data Geek 101. If you were to do reports, if you are, working with BI, one of the first things you learned, this is like, for the last 30 years, is what's called a star schema. Star schema is putting your transactions, your sales, your inventory transactions, your manufacturing transactions in the middle, and you put around the dimensions that control whatever that you're looking for. So let's say if you're trying to see analysis of your sales, you have the sales in the middle, and then you have your customers, your products, your people territories around it. That's a star schema. Star schema has been around as a great technology for data modeling for 30 years, widely used. Maybe you don't even know, if you're a business analyst, you use probably star schemas all the time, maybe even if you don't know about the concept. Well, the problem with this star schema is when you need to see data across multiple stars, you say I have a report for sales, a report for your CRM, a report for your inventory transactions, what you have on hand, a report for the purchase order, a report for the work order. When you have these multiple store schemas, you have to usually export them to Excel and combine them manually. Glue all of this data together, what you have on hand today, what's coming in from your purchase order, what's coming in from your work orders, what's going to go out, and manually blend this thing. So this is a nightmare. This is time consuming, and that's why probably you're struggling. The Galaxy schema, finally, the Galaxy schema is a way that you put all of your facts together in the middle. This was impossible 5 years ago. Galaxy schema was a dream of the BI people. And only in the last 5 years, some of the products that we support, like Power BI and Tableau, they allow you to put in a single Galaxy schema. You can see manufacturing components, purchase orders, sales, inventory. I don't have here CRM, but CRM could be in the middle. And around, you put the dimensions that control the data. In this whole Galaxy schema will allow you to combine the whole data. Once the Galaxy schema has been modeled, you don't have to manually export to Excel and glue them manually. It's all pre-linked behind the scenes. When you go to the report, all the data has been glued, and the truth has been maintained on the back end.
So a question for you. So maybe can you touch on the technical limitations? Why Galaxy schema was not possible before, but it is possible. I mean, in the age of AI, the way people perceive this and understand this is they don't like to see all of this, right? So right now the expectation from everybody is everything should be one click or one prompt. I don't need to do all of this. So maybe talk about why that was not possible. What were the technical limitations? And are those technical limitations relevant in the age of AI?
Yep. Good question. I'm going to answer the thing that I know, and I'm going to tell the things that I don't know.
Sorry for the hard questions.
No. It's a very good question. So first of all, when I mention about the star schemas, let's say if you want to see sales, you take the sales details and then you put around the customer, the item, whatnot. In the past, if you try to use a reporting tool, any reporting tool, and put, let's say, purchase order. So I want to see my sales that I have, my sales order that I'm going to be shipping, and I'm going to see what's coming from my purchase order. If you put those two transactions together in a Galaxy schema and you try to run the report, would usually crash. It's too much data to complexity, and these reporting tools, until about 5 years ago, they would just choke on it. That's why people have to export to Excel and then glue the data manually. It was just a nightmare. If you ask me specifically how in the last 5-10 years people have solved this problem, this is not part of the DataSelf. We use Tableau and Power BI that they have solved this problem.
Yeah.
But I bet you that this was not something that the prior technology could address. So the good news is now we can. How AI now, this problem, the Galaxy schema, we started to see in the market about 5 years ago. So probably have been working on it for about 10 years. So it's a 5-year-old new feature, amazing new feature. In the new AI generation is about 2 years old. That is layer on top of. What I can tell you about the AI on top of is if you don't use a Galaxy schema, the AI might not be able to find inconsistencies across multiple star schemas because they might have difference between them. When you build a Galaxy schema and you model the data in a way that all of the data is consistent, now the AI can go across all of this Galaxy schema without coming with hallucinations because the single version of truth is guaranteed by the Galaxy schema. So this is very technical, this is a rabbit hole that we can go deep if we want to.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is great from the customer's perspective because they need to understand the differences between different technologies, right? Because there is a lot of noise in the market, right? So if you talk to some of your AI native peers and they feel that schema is legacy, that's how they talk. And I don't know how relevant that is because what you are talking is real. Okay. You are talking about that. Okay. And I don't know when you contrast between your star schema and Galaxy schema, the technical limitations are going to be just in terms of layers. How many layers can you support, right? Sometimes, let's say if in this case, we are talking about manufacturing environment, they are going to have multiple layers of bombs, right? Some systems had limitations. Okay, I can support only two layers of bombs, or how your inventory is going to be layered, there are going to be restrictions in that. So I don't know if the limitations are really in terms of the layers, but customers don't understand this. They don't understand that they need to ask these questions before they get any sort of system, and they are going to get, and obviously either it's going to choke, or they are going to have a lot of surprises. They are not going to get what they are looking for. So I think these technical differences matter. So thank you so much for talking about that, I guess.
Let me add a human layer on top of this very good point. Until a company embraces our Galaxy schema and makes it work, until that happens, what happens is every star schema is usually a problem of a different group of people.
Yeah.
Purchasing is handled by purchasing, sales by sales, production by production. And quite often, part of the challenges across different areas is because everyone talks a different perspective.
Yeah.
The numbers don't go beautifully to the next layer. It's a human problem, right? That once you start to force the data to go across all these different areas of your business, and you have the Galaxy schema as a way to help model the data and help every part of the organization to improve or fine-tune their processes to make their data not only good for them, but good for the previous and the next departments, right? Once you start modeling the whole data in a Galaxy schema is when the magic and the automation takes a whole different level. So part of the problem with the technology is also the technology helping different departments come up with a new way to capture the data that is friendlier for the data to go across all of them. Make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. So, Dennis, you have a commenting.
So Johnny, I'm not a technical guy, but listening to what your explanation of the star schema and the Galaxy schema, and I'm sure this is oversimplifying things, but it sounds to me like really within the star schema, using a star schema, you're essentially building data silos, and communicating between the silos is the limitation of using the star schema. And with the Galaxy schema, you've broken down the silos.
Very good way to put it. Yep.
Yeah.
In the Galaxy schema, to me, is when I think about the companies embracing it, it's not a magic bullet, no, but it was a missing bullet, right? If you're only working with the silos, each one with their own star schemas, they can make that star schema shine for them.
Yeah.
But again, across the star schemas, it's human, right? If you talk many times, I'm the company owner. Many times when you have issues between two departments, is because the problem is in the middle. Nobody knows they're in the middle. They're right in their own perspective, but they don't see in the middle. And in the Galaxy schema forces, in a way, the companies to see a data flow from a decision. The other interesting thing is, usually the data flow across, let's say, an ERP system, you have to guarantee the data goes all across all the flows from a transaction standpoint. Sure, the ERP has to guarantee that you have a sales order, becomes a production order, becomes a shipment, becomes an invoice, becomes a receipt, becomes a line in the P&L. This is guaranteed from a transaction standpoint by, let's say, an ERP system, sure. But many times when you need, to work with bulk information that you need to aggregate, those rules fall apart. That's where the silos, the star schemas, they work individually, but they don't work across. In the Galaxy schema, guarantees that the data at the aggregated level flows across all of the different, data silos.
Okay.
And then is a data silo. Sometimes people think, the ERP is a data silo. Well, within the ERP, every department quite often is a data silo. Well, we have 6 minutes to go. This slide usually takes 2 minutes, but it was a good conversation. I'm going to move on, and I'm going to show now much more quickly a little bit of the user interface, how companies use BI with AI for helping this whole problem that we talk about. So first of all, usually things start at the sales side. Based on the demand that you are selling or you expect to sell, then is going to be driving the production. And when you're looking at sales, I'm going to make this very quickly. one of the cool things with a solution like DataSelf is the ability to look at these dashboards that give you the big numbers. But then if you want to see some data points, you want to slice and dice it, like, in this example, I'm seeing sales this year and last year, the variances by period, by territory, by customer, and by product or services, if you sell services. And if you want to slice and dice it, it's easy. If I want to see what's happening in New York, I click New York. Now the dashboard shows only New York information. And even though New York is growing 25%, if I look at my customers, this customer, the third largest customer last year, has almost almost a million in decline. Why this customer is declining? You click the customer, and then you see now this dashboard only for this customer. So the ability to take some big KPIs can be, sales, production, and slice and dice it easily without knowing technical things is amazing. And in Excel, this would be pretty much impossible. So that's one of the things I want to show. Cash flow projection, I'm going to kind of skip some of these things. Okay, we have the sales, we know where the things are going. Do we have money to support this new batch of production? Cash flow projection, quite often you have to bring data from multiple places. How much money you have in the bank today? What's coming in from receivables? If you have any loans, what money is going to go out in payroll, in bills, if you're paying loans and whatever, and based on the production that you have with the payment terms. Will I run out of cash? Will I have to get more money from the bank? So having all of these data points together is something that people usually do in Excel, also very time consuming, and the BI can completely automate it. I'm going to go through a bunch of other things because we're running out of time. Finally, in the manufacturing side of things, quite often, upper level people will want to have their dashboards showing a bunch of pictures, showing what's being produced, the productivity, if there are defects. And again, if you click on these bars, automatically the whole solution filters to show exactly this is the item causing more delays, or maybe some people that are having challenges getting the production going. So dashboards in manufacturing, very important. Bill of materials for some businesses is a no problem. If you have multi-layer, 2, 3, 4, 5 levels, sometimes 10 levels of BOM, it can be a nightmare to take what you have to produce, the finished goods, break into the multiple layers, what you have in stock, what you're going to be purchasing, what's going to be manufacturing. BOM alone, for some companies, we have some clients that they only bought the BI because BOM was a nightmare to get in Excel. And the BI can automate, breaking the BOM into multiple levels and allow people to slice and dice it. Production order is the part of the BI that we have had the least amount of reporting. Quite often people have production order pretty well done. In most of the BI we have done around production order is just showing upper management the main KPIs and how people can see it. So I'm going to go to the final step, which is the probably number one reporting area that we improve for manufacturing, which is the inventory planning. You can classify your items by high demand, low demand, whatnot. And for every item, you can see what you have on hand today, what's coming in from work order, what's going to go out in your actual sales order that already promised, as well as the sales projection. And based on that data point, we start to calculate what's the projection of your quantity on hand moving forward at the finished good level as well as the raw material level. And if you see reds, mean you're going to run out of that material, and the material can block the whole production. So most of the manufacturing companies that we have worked with, the inventory planning, and I just show you one model, is where was the area where the biggest challenges were. And then we automated the majority of the data preparation process. Since we have only 1 minute, I'm going to stop it here.
Yeah. So I guess, I mean, I don't think we can cover everything. Obviously, what you guys are doing is very enterprise level, right? So we probably need to invite you again, for a deeper dive in some of these topics. But overall, I guess, great job. I don't necessarily have any questions right now from the audience. Dennis, do you have any questions, comments so far? I may have some questions if you don't, and then we can probably wrap if that's okay with you guys.
Yeah, no, I appreciate Johnny showing that, and I think that he really pointed as he walked through the dashboards, shows how easy it is with a BI solution to view and slice and dice the data. Building slicers like that in Excel, really not practical.
Yeah. And so, Johnny, I guess to round up the discussion, I guess we started with the case study. And so maybe talk a little bit from that customer perspective, what were the challenges and what you did, I guess, maybe in 1 minute. And then we can wrap. Yeah.
So, what I showed you pretty much was the use case of that client that I mentioned that was taking Wednesday through Friday to do the whole inventory planning.
Yeah.
After they adopted DataSelf and they automated the process, pretty much the majority of the Excel work was gone, was completely automated. No more dispute about the numbers. They could do the whole planning on Wednesday as long as people were available to do their part of the work. The point was, from being uncertain, only running, from Wednesday through Friday. Now they're doing on Wednesday, and the good news was, any day they want to review the numbers, they just run the reports. They don't need to call the business analyst. Can you please put it together? Show me the numbers. No, they just run the reports. For every department would have their own KPIs anytime to tell, hey, we got a new sale. Can you please change today, not next Friday? So their whole inventory planning in manufacturing planning become pretty much ad hoc.
Yeah, this is amazing. So once again, thank you so much, guys. And again, I think we need to bring you guys back. This is the start of the conversation. I think we can branch off from this and we can discuss much deeper. Obviously, if you guys have any sort of questions, you can reach out to any of these guys, Johnny, Dennis. They are very approachable, available on LinkedIn, etc. And we are going to have links as well. I think that's already present on landing, page. Johnny and Dennis, if you guys have any sort of links, send those our way, and we'll be happy to send that out and include that on the page. On that note, thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in today. This is the end of the webinar. We do a lot of these webinars. We are doing 2 or 3 per week. So if you want to know about them, the best place again would be on the events and webinar page on elevate.iq.com, as well as the newsletter if you want to subscribe to that. On that note, thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. I'll see you in the next webinar.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Sam.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.